was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. You may have noticed about that time, for the first couple of months, we were having live meetings and I wasn't doing very well. They were getting the meds right, and I think they got them right, but now I've changed to where I'm going to deep brain stimulation, which is a Parkinson's treatment where they put nerves in your brain, or tie into nerves in your brain, put a pacemaker-like thing in your chest, and then wire it into those nerves. And supposed to help you a great deal with the tremors. If this doesn't work, of course, I want the council to let me know, or the committee to let me know. And there'll be no hard feelings if you have to put somebody else. But this is where the need for a co-chair comes from, for the most part, I think. But that's where I stand at the moment. I've got the wires in. They cut into my brain earlier this week. Tomorrow, Friday, I go back and get the wires run down the back of my neck into this thing in my chest. And then the early November, I go to get the thing programmed. So that's the status of things. I wanted to let you know where we stood. Thank you.
Jeff, I want to let you know we're all, I've got to come closer.
Pat wants to say a few words. He's just walking over closer.
Jeff, thank you for that. And just as I told you earlier, we're all thinking about you, and you're in our thoughts, and we wish you the best of luck with this. And we'll be thinking about you, and if you need anything, just let us know.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jeff. We just want to echo what Pat said. We're all thinking of you, sending you a lot of warm thoughts, and we really appreciate everything that you've done for this committee through the years. So we're all here for you. We're rooting for you.
Thank you.
So this evening, what we're going to do is we're going to, Dr. Neal has stepped in to help chair this meeting. So Dr. Neal, I think we're going to turn it over to you. The first thing that we'll need to go through is just let everyone approve the minutes, and then we'll kind of move on from there. So we'll turn it over to you, Dr. Neal.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Jeff, for keeping us informed. So the best wishes to you, and we'll be here. All right, so calling the October meeting of the Finfish Management Advisory Committee to order. With the announcements, kind of staff's already gone over this a bit. When you're not speaking, keep yourself muted, please. This will not work if everyone's got open mics. And then we'll just kind of get through this the best we can. The public, committee members can unmute and mute themselves at will. The public will have to wait, and there's a chat feature on the lower right hand of your screen if you're on a computer. And if you want to speak when we start taking public comment, which we're assuming is going to be with the COBIA issue, put your name in the chat, so we'll call you one at a time so we can unmute you. If you're by a phone-in caller for the public, we'll probably just have to open the phone lines later. All right, so I guess that's the FMAC announcements and Jeff's other announcement. All right, so now we are to the second agenda item, approval of the minutes from November and March. So are there any additions, corrections, deletions to the meetings? Let's see which one we first. To the November minutes. All right, hearing none. If you spoke, I didn't hear you. Are there any changes, corrections, deletions to the March minutes? Okay, hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes from these two meetings?
John Bello, I move that both meeting minutes be approved.
Seconded by Jeff D.
We have a first and a second. All right, Pat, can I just call the question? Are you going to want a roll call vote? What do you want?
Not for minutes, that's
Not
fine.
minutes, I think you can just do, consent.
That's consent.
That's just consent.
All right. Anyone opposed to approving the minutes? Speak up. All right, minutes are approved by consent. All right, now we're to the new business, election of a vice chair. Jeff just kind of went through this. The Finfish committee has been a little unusual. Most of these advisory committees have an associate commissioner that is volunteered to chair the committee. Jeff has served on the Mid-Atlantic Council, and he has the kind of the weight and the experience to chair this thing. I think more important, he's just been willing to do it, to drive from Timbuktu to attend these meetings and run them. But at this point, I think he feels that he should have a backup. So that's where we're at right now. So we need an election of a vice chair for when Jeff is not able, if he's not able for a particular meeting. Do we have any nominations or anybody stepping to the plate?
I promise it's not hard, guys. We don't bite.
Basically, you have to do what I'm doing right now, talk.
Yep.
You know, in the past, I know Ernie has done it when he was an associate commissioner. In general, it has been an associate commissioner, but I don't think it has to be. And so I think any of you could do this.
Mike Lightfoot will step in if I'm the only one.
You already said you have a hard time talking. All right. Well, thank you, Mike. Anybody else have that wish to back up Jeff? All right, hearing none, I think Mike just volunteered.
We could nominate Ernie, if Ernie will do it. He was good at it last time.
What? Ernie, you have thoughts on that?
I think Scott McDonald nominated me. Is that what happened?
Yes, sir.
Throw you under the bus, Ernie, but you do a good job at it. So that's your name comes to my mind.
Well, I've done it for quite a few years. If somebody else wants to do it, it'd be fine with me. And if not, I can do it. Like I did it while I was on the commission, but I also done it for quite a number of years before that. I was the only elected chair they ever had. So it's up to the committee.
All right, any other comments? You know, I would love the raise hand feature so I can see I can't see any of you. All right, Pat, you need a roll call vote for this, or what do you want for this one?
Ernie, I appreciate your experience and want to say that.
Yeah, I'm a little torn by that. I don't want to put people on the spot.
Jeff is talking. Go ahead, Jeff.
I just wanted to say that to Ernie that I appreciate his experience with the process, and if he's willing to do it, you know, I don't want to say any less of Michael. He's certainly a good man as well, but Ernie knows his process. So either one is fine with me.
If this feels uncomfortable for the committee, we can also do this offline so that you don't have to select between two people while being kind of put on the spot.
Yeah, honestly, I can't recall the last time we had two people be nominated. It's usually like if somebody's nominated, we basically immediately close the nominations and accept the motion. So it's if you guys want, what we could do is we can send around, you know, a quick doodle poll, and you can just vote on that and be done with it, and then we can announce it, like, you know, by email. If that's okay with you guys.
Fine by me.
I think that's a good idea, Pat. And you know, and what I'm pleased that you've got two people willing to do it. That's usually the hard thing, is getting somebody willing to do it.
Yeah. All right, so we'll just do that. We'll send out some due.
Hey, Pat, this is Lightfoot. Ernie is great. He's got experience at it. I'll just step aside. It makes it easy.
Okay. Is that okay with you?
Listen, I'm fine. If someone else wants to do it, I'm really good with that. All right, Jeff, you have your backup.
All right, we got Ernie.
All right.
All right.
Congratulations, Ernie.
Appreciate it.
Okay. All right, so that brings us to the real issue, COBIA. So who's taking over that? Let's see, who was that? Smoked, okay.
Hi, guys. This is Deputy Chief Shanna Madsen. I'm actually going to do the first part of the presentation. Just stand by for just a moment. Okay. I'm going to start off the meeting with discussing what the hot topic for the night. It's our Virginia recreational measures for COBIA in 2021. Next slide, please, Summers. So to get the meeting started, I wanted to open transparently with the fact that Virginia will need to reduce their future recreational COBIA harvest. I think you've all seen that. I think that's why you're all here. Virginia has gone over its recreational harvest quota in the last few years, and we have to adhere to the regulations in the fishery management plan for COBIA. I want to kind of set the stage and let everyone know that if we are found out of compliance with that fishery management plan, Virginia's recreational COBIA fishery could be shut down completely. So we need to operate within the confines of that fishery management plan and its associated quotas in order to continue fishing for COBIA. I do want to recognize that this is really an important and has become a very beloved fish by our recreational fishing community. So we recognize that there's a lot of disappointment and frustration surrounding the fact that we're going to need to make these adjustments in our management measures in response to this reduction. However, we also recognize that our anglers want to be good stewards of the resource, so we really want to use this meeting to gain input about what recreational measures will balance that conservation that we need to take and allow utilization by the recreational community. I would like to remind everyone to please remain respectful of each other and of the staff. Remember, they are not personally reducing Virginia's harvest. The staff have worked really hard to put together some options that meet the reduction necessary while still giving you guys the chance to fish for COBIA. So we're trying really hard here, and we recognize that there's some frustration, but let's all try to, work through that. I'm going to open the meeting by presenting the history of COBIA management to kind of orient everyone to why we're doing what we're doing. And then from there, Summer Smott, who's one of our planners, is going to move into the reduction calculations and the options of the management measures that meet that necessary reduction. After that point, we're going to let the committee ask questions and make any comments that they have. And once the committee has kind of worked through all of that, we thought that it would be really useful to open it to public comment prior to the committee making a final recommendation in the form of a motion, so that the committee has some time to hear public input before making their final recommendation. And with that, I just want to open the floor to the committee to see if they have any comments or question on the order of operations, if they're okay with us speaking with the public before they make a recommendation, essentially, is what I'd like to get some feedback on.
That works for me. I think it's important to hear what the public has to say.
Great.
I think that it is a standard practice. I thought that we always would hear from staff. The committee would question staff or have an interchange with staff. Then we'd hear from the public. Then we do a motion if there was one.
It depends. Robert's rules are different, Tom, so we're checking with the committee to make sure that they're okay and comfortable with the way that we're going to proceed, and it sounds like you are. So we'll carry on in that fashion then. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the history of COBIA management from 2017 to 2019. That's the time period that we're going to be focused on. So in 2017, the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission adopted the Interstate Fishery Management Plan for COBIA. You'll hear me refer to that as an FMP. And this kind of set the stage for cooperative management with the South Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico Fishery Management Councils. And it defined the management unit for COBIA from Georgia through New York. At this time, that set a coastwide recreational harvest limit of about 620,000 pounds and a coastwide commercial harvest limit of 50,000 pounds. Next slide, please. So Virginia receives 39.4% of that coastwide quota, which during that time period equated to approximately 244,000 pounds or about 8,700 fish. So the chart below lists our recreational management measures from 2017 through 2019. And if you'll remember, back in 2018, at that commission meeting, we added 15 days to the end of the COBIA season while maintaining our size and vessel limits because our predicted landings using the VMRC carcass donation program, that average rate was much lower than the RHL at the time. So we thought it was pretty safe to assume that we could add some extra days back onto the fishery. And also during this time, the commission chose to remove the gaffing prohibition, which was originally in regulation, once again, because they believe those predicted landings using that carcass donation program were so much lower than the RHL. So we still had a pretty good buffer in place. Next slide, please. So in 2019, Amendment 1 transferred that FMP to sole management by ASMFC. So now COBIA is managed by ASMFC alone. And at the ASMFC meeting in February, they established a new harvest quota of 80,000 fish, or 2.4 million pounds. And that was set in response to the new stock assessment, which said we weren't overfished and the stock was not being, wasn't experiencing overfishing. So that everyone understands now in recreational harvest, we are now given our quota in numbers of fish for the recreational sector. We no longer get it in poundage, so we no longer can use that carcass program to convert the poundage ourselves into numbers of fish. Another thing important to note is that currently our quota is distributed 92% to the recreational fishery and 8% to the commercial fishery. That's also established in the FMP. But ASMFC is seeking to review that and potentially change that. They'll be discussing that at that next week's ASMFC meeting week. Addendum 1 essentially proposes alternative allocation strategies that kind of allows for more proportional changes to the commercial and recreational split. And reason being is when we came in with a new stock assessment that also used the newly calibrated MRIP numbers, overall the quota increased greatly. And so they're going to try to see if they can make more proportional changes to the commercial and recreational split. So that makes more sense with this large quota increase. Next slide, please. So another thing that Amendment 1 established was a harvest specification process, and that allows the states to set their own seasons and their own vessel limits to achieve their respective targets. However, these state management measures need to be evaluated every 3 years. So the language that I have on the screen is directly from the FMP. I'll read that into the record and for the folks that are on the phone line. So after 3 years, if a state's average annual landings over that 3-year time period are greater than their annual soft harvest target, that state shall adjust their season length or vessel limits for the following 3 years as necessary to prevent exceeding their share in the future. Also, if a state's recreational landings exceed its annual recreational harvest target, that state must adjust its recreational vessel limit or season to reduce harvest such that future annual landings would be expected to achieve the new state recreational harvest target. So what we kind of wanted to make clear with this, and we clarified this with ASMFC, is with this language in the FMP, we can only make adjustments to our vessel limits and to our seasons to achieve the new soft target. So we can't make any changes to our size limits to achieve that soft target. It has to be these two management measure options. Next slide. So this is the Virginia recreational harvest from 2017 through 2019. That's what that chart is. These numbers have been calibrated to the changes in the MRIP effort survey. So that everyone is aware, MRIP is the only recreational data source that ASMFC will currently accept for their recreational harvest calculations. As I mentioned previously, the yearly soft target that we had from 2017 to 2019 was approximately 8,724 fish. We exceeded that in each of our years. So in 2020, when the board set specifications, Virginia's new soft target was increased. It's increased to 29,039 fish. But as you can see, we also have still gone over that in 2 of the 3 years. And so we need to make adjustments to our recreational harvest in response to that new soft target to try to meet that new target of approximately 30,000 fish. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, Virginia is allocated the 39.4% of the coastwide quota. What we want to make the committee and the public aware of is, obviously with these things in Addendum 1, there could be some changes to the recreational soft target for Virginia in the next upcoming years, 2021 through 2023. If the status quo option is selected through Addendum 1, our recreational soft target remains the same as it was this year in 2020, which is 29,039 fish. This is the number that we used for the analyses as we were going through our reduction analyses. If the sector allocations between the commercial and the recreational sector change through Addendum 1, there could be some minor updates to the management measures that we select tonight. We chose this number because it's the most conservative number. All of the other options in Addendum 1 actually make the recreational harvest quota go up slightly. These are very small changes. So if you think about it in terms of Virginia getting 39.4% of the coastwide quota, we're getting an even smaller proportional change than what the overall change is for the coast. So what we're looking at is whatever we decide tonight, we might get an additional few days on the either end of the season, and we'll talk to you guys about what's preferred. But I kind of want to make clear that tops, we're maybe getting a couple of hundred extra fish. So it's not a huge difference. And with that, I think we are wrapping up on the management side of things. So we're going to roll into our season and vessel limit adjustment options. Do you want to do it from here? Okay.
Mike Lightfoot has a question, please.
Go ahead, Mike. What do you got?
How many fish do you show were caught this year?
We don't have that yet. MRIP, we won't have that data until much later. And this year is going to, I think everybody is very concerned about what this year is going to look like. No one really knows.
What was last year?
Last year, if you could pull that back up, Summers.
55,000.
55,000.
Okay.
2019.
Thank you.
This is Tom Powers. I have a question.
Sure, Tom. What do you got?
How does that 55,770 compare to the mandatory reporting program that recreational fishermen have for COBIA, which should now be really good because people are losing their ability to fish if they're not reporting?
Yeah, we're going to get into that at the end of the meeting, Tom, so we can go over that. But we really just want the focus right now to be on looking at the options and discussing those, but we can talk about that more at the end of the meeting. What I did mention is ASMFC right now only accepts MRIP as recreational harvest calculations. So that is what we're bound to at this time, but we'll talk more about that at the end. Okay, hold on, let me get forward here. Oops. Okay, so first of all, I just want to let you guys know that we did actually take all of these options forward to the COBIA TC through ASMFC, so they've all been approved. So that's not something we have to worry about. All right, so as discussed, Amendment 1 created a new harvest specification. This fishery is evaluated on a 3-year basis using MRIP data. The average of the past 3 years of MRIP, 2017 through 2019, indicates we must take a reduction of 42% to achieve that new soft target set for Virginia. In this table, you will see the COBIA MRIP totals from each year, the average of the 3 years, the new target, and what we must reduce in order to achieve that new target. And like Shanna has said already, we are only using MRIP data because at this time it is the only approved data by ASMFC for determining reductions to the fishery. So also, as Shanna has said, we can't change the minimum size because the language in the FMP by ASMFC says so. And when we asked for clarification from ASMFC, it was noted that when final action was taken in 2019, the board was intentional in not wanting differing size limits among the states. So as such, all states must adhere to that 36-inch fork length, or in our case, the 40-inch total length minimum size limit. So here's the first option we will present. There's season options. So if it is preferred that the vessel limits don't change, then these are the possible options for seasons that meet that necessary reduction. The split season must have at least a full month between the closing day and opening day because of issues with enforceability. So as such, the split season option will be more difficult to adjust if we actually do end up gaining days back from that final action on Addendum 1. And just so John Bellow, so you can hear it, I know you can't see it. The first option is June 1st through July 23rd. And then we have July 1st through August 19th. And then June 1st to July 12th and August 12th to September 15th. And all of the reductions range from 43% to 47%. The next option is a change in vessel limit. If it is preferred that the season does not change, this is the only option that will meet the reduction. A decrease to a 2-vessel limit is only a reduction of 25%, so that is not large enough to meet the reduction required. A 1-vessel limit does meet that reduction at 53%. So finally, the last option is a combination of the season adjustments and vessel limit reductions. After exhausting several options while keeping in mind enforceability, staff agrees that that first option listed here, a season of June 15th through September 15th and a vessel limit of 2, is the best option to meet the reduction. In addition, although this is not quantifiable, staff would like to discuss prohibiting gaffing in the 2021 through 2023 season. In the years that gaffing was prohibited, only 2% of intercepted cobia were undersized. In the years that gaffing was not prohibited, 15% of the intercepted cobia by MRIP were undersized. We hope to reduce the harvesting of undersized cobia by once again prohibiting gaffing. So our staff recommendation, because the split season will be difficult to add days back and also difficult to enforce, staff is recommending a season of June 15th through September 15th. We are also recommending reducing the vessel limit to 2 per vessel and prohibiting gaffing. The minimum size portion of the regulation would stay the same. And here are all the options on one slide, and we will now entertain questions and a discussion from the FMAC committee members before we get public comment and take a motion.
This is John Bellow. I can't see it, but I just want to make sure I understood that the staff is recommending 615 to 915 with a reduction to 2 fish, keep the same sizes, and prohibit gaffing. That is the staff recommendation, correct?
Correct. Yes, that is the staff recommendation. And that option actually meets our reduction exactly at 42%.
Thank you.
This is Mike Lightfoot. I mean, I think you guys did a great job. I like the last one, C. But the question is, how about issuing 29,000 tags? And there you can keep complete control over how many cobia are caught, because it would be illegal to have a cobia in your possession without a tag in it.
Do you want me to?
You start and then I'll follow up.
Okay, yeah. So hey, Mike, this is Shanna. So I understand what you're getting at with that, but the problem is that would cause a fishery that not everybody would be able to participate in. So, you know, we really want to make sure that the recreational fishing community is still able to fish for cobia. This is a soft target. We think that the combinations that we've put up there are able to achieve that target. Another issue would be that would be a very, very heavy lift for VMRC. So we definitely need to bring in some additional staff to take care of a program like that. And we want to keep cobia open for all recreational fishermen, not just a select few.
Yeah, I mean, you know, just to add to that, I mean, you know, since I head the division, I have to worry about the money, and that would be the big thing. It's like, you know, we just did, you know, we did away with, did not do our trophy fishery for striped bass, you know, for one reason, because of the cost. And it's, you know, Mike, it's a good idea, but the cost would be prohibitive for us at this time. That's the main thing. I mean, you know, it's like, you know, we went through that with striped bass, and we know what the cost was for that. And this would probably be, considering how many permittees we have, it would be expensive, probably even more.
What is
Is there any way to get ASMFC to accept the mandatory reporting program versus the MRIP?
Talk about that later.
We are going to talk about that later. I wanna make sure that we keep focused on this portion right now, because that's something that we could definitely talk about for a considerable amount of time. As of right now, no, but we'll go into that more once we kind of work through our options and what the committee thinks about them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What is the current vessel possession limit and season?
So the current season is June 1st, and that runs through September 30th. And the current vessel possession limit is 3 per person, or 1 per person, whatever, 1 per person, 3 per vessel.
Okay, so we're just giving up 2 weeks on the front end, 2 weeks on the back end, and 1 fish per vessel.
Yeah.
Going with staff's proposal.
Right. So the data that we looked at, the end of September was not a hot time for cobia anyway. So okay. The savings there weren't too great. It was really the front end of the season. The other reason why we selected that is because if we do take those 15 days off the front end of the season, you are helping to protect the spawning stock. So we think that was the best option on the table, at least from a staff perspective.
I like it. I think it looks good. I think staff did a good job. I would like to hear from the public on that, you know, the recreational fishermen to see, but I think that would work as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, we used to be at a 2 fish vessel limit previously, and we had increased it. So that's another reason why we would recommend going back down to a 2 fish vessel limit to help, you know, get those savings.
And I think it looks fair. Absolutely.
Is it still 1 per person up to 2?
Yes, Tom. Yep.
Thank you.
So the committee.
Any more questions for staff?
I have one question for Ken Neal.
Well, I'm right here.
So for when COBIA are in the bay, when do they generally show up or down in the lower bay? And at what time of year are they generally showing up around Windmill Point, Reedville area?
It's been getting earlier. We used to really seriously start fishing for cobia, like beginning of June. May 20th would be when they first show up. Now we're seeing them very beginning of May. And then they probably get up into the Windmill Point area, back when we used to start back in June.
Okay. Yeah, and I can second that because they have been up at in June. Some of them were up inside the Potomac at Smith Point. So given that they're coming earlier and earlier, would it make any sense to not take 2 weeks off the beginning, but take 4 weeks off of the end?
So our MRIP data that we have to use to take this reduction, the only MRIP data we have runs from our season for the past 3 years, which is June 1st through September 30th. So we can't look at any of the data outside of that season.
MRIP, okay.
And the further what she just said, we get more bang for our buck with the days we take off at the beginning of the season than what we do at the end of the season.
Yeah, so if you got rid of all of September, that still wouldn't meet the reduction necessary. So those first 15 days are the ones that are really driving that bus.
Okay.
All right, any other questions from the committee?
So when do they spawn in our area?
So that time period,
Yeah.
early June.
That early June would be protecting some spawning stock, or at least giving them a chance to spawn.
Okay, I think this would be a good time for the public who wishes to speak to start putting their names in that chat button, so we can start calling on you. So that's where we'll need to call on you one at a time.
Yeah, so what we'll do, Dr. Neal, is to kind of orient everybody to the screen. So at the bottom of your screen on the lower right-hand corner, you should see a little chat bubble. If you click on that button and let us know that you would like to speak, we can proceed that way, and I'll start putting together a list of folks who would like to speak. I have a couple already in the box. I don't see anyone on the phone alone without being connected to WebEx, so everyone should have the capability to chat me and let me know that they would like to talk. So I'll put together a short list right now, and then I'll call your name and you'll be able to speak at that time. I will unmute you, so just stand by.
Robert Wiggins.
I got him. Okay, so. Okay.
Oh, Devin just added his name.
Huh?
Devin Riley just added his name.
Okay, Devin?
Yep.
You want to keep an eye on that?
Yep.
Okay.
Here, you want to trade?
No, this is fine.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so to start off with, first on my list, I have Mike Avery. Mike, I'm going to unmute you, and you should be able to address the committee.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I have one question and then a recommendation for the committee. The first question is, how did staff determine that there were more undersized cobia gaffed? Seems to me that'd be kind of hard to figure out. And second, my recommendation to the FMAC is that I believe it'd be more helpful rather than the FMAC just pick one option out of these 8. What I'd like to see is maybe the FMAC maybe narrow it down to 3 options, something manageable, and then between now and the commission meeting, we could then socialize those 3 with the general public, and we can maybe come up with a consensus. I'm not sure if just picking one out of those 8 is at this moment, since we've just learned about these 8, would be helpful. But narrowing them down to about 3 choices would be helpful. So that's kind of just a suggestion to the FMAC, because I'm not really prepared to pick one of these today, because I'd like to go back and talk to some other anglers too. So that's all I have.
Yeah. So Mike, let me start off with your question first. So, you're right. Causation doesn't, or correlation doesn't necessarily imply causation. But what we did do is we went back and we looked at the time period where gaffing was prohibited, and there was less undersized fish at that time. We can't verify that there being more. Maybe you want to go back to that slide just real quick. We can't verify that the increase there is because of gaffing. However, we did want to stress that the commission selected to remove the prohibition on gaffing because they believed that we were going to be so well under the RHL, which we were not. So we wanted to bring that to the FMAC for them to discuss again. We're happy to take comments from you on that if you'd like to speak on that as well. And Mike, I did want to note, so Pat and I did have a discussion about forming some sort of survey monkey that could be distributed to the public following this meeting with the options. I think it's still important for the FMAC to make a recommendation so that when we go to the commission in December, we have an FMAC recommendation as well as a recommendation that comes from that survey monkey. So I think what the FMAC can help us do today and what the public can help us do today is really narrow down that list. You're right, there's like 8 options on there. If we can maybe narrow that down to 3 usable options and put those out there, we'd be happy to work with folks to get that distributed out so people can partake in that survey.
So I guess you're saying that when a dockside survey was done, they surveyed an undersized cobia that was gaffed, and so it was an illegal fish that the angler brought back and was surveyed. And so it seems to me that'd be the only way you could find out that an undersized cobia was gaffed if they basically got caught with undersized fish. Is that what you're saying?
Well, we're not. So what we're saying is there was an increase in gaffing when we released the prohibition on gaffing. Or undersized fish when we released the prohibition on gaffing. We're not saying that necessarily the fish that were intercepted were indefinitely gaffed. We have no way of being able to tell that. But what we did want to bring to the committee's attention is that there has been an increase in the take of undersized cobia, and potentially one of the issues could be gaffing.
Okay.
Yeah. But Mike, since we have you on the line, are there options here that you would recommend that we put into that survey? Like what works from your standpoint?
I would like to see one from each category. You know, one from the season, one from the and the combination, and then I like to see 3, and maybe one from each bin would be what I'd want to see.
Okay.
And I'm not prepared to commit to any one of the options now.
Okay, that's fair. All right, Mike, if you don't have anything else, I'm going to move on my list.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right. Next on my list is Jonathan French. Jonathan, I'm going to unmute you.
Thank you. Checking to hear if you can hear my audio.
Yes, we can. You sound great.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. I have some prepared comments, and then I want to do one quick editorial comment. I've appeared in front of this group many times before, and I always welcome the thoughtfulness of the group. I don't come before you with any consensus. You know, we've run a Facebook group to discuss these issues, and I think more than any other time in the history of this issue, there are varying opinions about how to move forward. I think what I'm here to speak about mostly is the asking for this group, the EMRC and other representatives of Virginia to call on Atlantic states for some flexibility, primarily because while MRIP numbers were moved, the MRIP numbers and the state allocation reflect a determination that was made several years ago. And the stock assessments that have taken place since show that the biomass is significantly larger. And I think that that's something that is being overlooked and needs to be part of the conversation. That being said, a lot of the fishermen I think that will speak today and a lot of the ones we're hearing from said this year was a bad season. And that most of the folks that will offer that feedback have focused their comments on there's a lower number of available large fish. I'm not saying that they're wrong. They've spent way more time on the water than I did this year. I made 3 trips. I caught 1 short fish and 1 keeper fish, and wasn't having a particular good amount of success. I have heard secondhand that Northern Virginia and Maryland chummers had banner years, and there's the potential for the folks who are going to offer feedback that the fishery is down is that the biomass is not any smaller. The behavior has just changed. And I really want to promote the idea that on top of looking at these caps as a way to improve the fishery, that there's significantly more time and energy and investment in doing root cause analysis for why these things are happening. Is the fishery going down because the fish have moved, or is the fishery going down because bottom water quality or temperature has changed, or is it because of overfishing? And I have not heard a clear answer to that conversation. My recommendation is for me only, and I recommend the seasons stay the same with no difference, and you push back on Atlantic states. That has worked before, and the reasoning is sound that the most recent stock assessment should be used and not old information to determine the allocation. And there are also issues with MRIP about the new version of MRIP increasing the effort quotient significantly higher. I also know that staff is limited in the amount of pushback they can give. That's the information that they're saying you have to use, and I understand that. But those issues need to be brought to the forefront, and until the questions about root cause as to what's really going on are answered, we're regulating out of ignorance, and that's not the intent of all the legislation that's setting up both regional and state management of these fisheries. So I want that to be considered moving forward. As for the options proposed on the screen, again, my recommendation is on the record. Of the options that are up, I would say that the majority of folks who are willing to accept a restriction would look at option C4 as being the preference. The general feedback was that mid-July was not productive this year, and that the prime times were September before the weather was bad and June. And, that July lull would be an appropriate time, especially since statistically that's when it seems to make the most positive impact on the catch numbers. I don't think that actually reflects the reality that this year July was really slow. But again, there is no consensus, and I'm speaking on my own behalf, not the large number of folks that I've tried to speak on behalf of in the past. Thank you for the time, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions you all have for me.
Thank you for your comments, Jonathan. We appreciate them. All right. Hearing no comments, I'm going to move down the list. Next, I have Bill Gorham. Hold on for a second, Bill. All right, Bill, you should be unmuted and able to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All righty. But I'm Bill Gorham, owner of Boat Up Lures, and I'm at a baseball game, so if you hear loud noises, I'm sorry. I'm out in center field trying to be away from it. But I was appointed to every part of the most recent stock assessment. along with West Blow. And my comments are more or less centered around not that there is a possible need for restrictions, not that it doesn't exist in Virginia, but the utter disbelief that what is being proposed today is nothing more than a continuation of the exact reason that we got out of federal management. COBIA has gone through 2 stock assessments now, both yielding not fished and not overfishing. Actually, this time we were further away from it. The purpose, as we understood it, and I thought it was clearly agreed upon, moving to the Atlantic states was to add flexibility to this fishery due to the extreme poor data that it has. We can do anything regulatory wise, and Emirates just going to chip it away. As we saw with the June, sorry for the horns, they'll be gone here in a second. I apologize. All right, sorry. Coming back. My hope is too that there can be a recommendation first through the FMAC to the staff. And staff, thank you all so much for everything that you have done with the reporting. I know we're going to try to make efforts to make that real. 80% of COBIA tagged in the bay are recaptured in the bay. So there's extreme scientific justification for Virginia to manage its in-state waters fishery. And I think there are a variety of things that we all want to see this fishery become. But there's absolutely no way that we'll ever achieve anything other than a continuation of being denied access to this fishery. The 2.4 million quota was yet again a catch average, which means there's winners and there's maybe some, there's losers and maybe some winners. And Virginia, again, is the major loser. Shortening the season will concentrate effort, and with known flaws in Emirates, we know what is going to happen. So I don't know how to suggest anything other than we try to figure it out either through adding flexibility through the Atlantic states, but anything that we do, one that's being proposed isn't any type of rebuilding plan or something that's supposed to achieve anything other than fit into a number for the stock. There are size limits that we could go to that would help the stock. COBIA spawn every 9 to 14 days, not in the beginning of June, not in July, not on a full moon, a half moon, or anything in between. They are batch spawners. They're like trout. I've always felt, and we've had a perfect scenario with COBIA, where there's been restrictions in other fisheries. It's popular, but it's popular because the fish are abundant. Not because they're not here and not around. The importance of this fishery is now tenfold to the recreational community, the tackle shops. So the longest season, I have always felt, the longest season that you can have maximizes the industry as far as sales and everything in between. So if I had to pick one, which I would adamantly not pick any of them, but it would be option C3, because that July period, if you look at water temperatures, that's actually the best time for best success of COBIA, which is above 80 degrees and below 86 degrees. And I'm sorry to sound so combative, but I think it's really important that the FMAC knows that this is doomed for failure, and it will continue to chip away at this fishery until Virginia is finally pinched out of it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Bill. I'm going to move down the list. Next on my list, I have Devin Riley. Hold on for just a moment, Devin, and I'll get you unmuted. Okay, Devin, you should be able to speak now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, first of all, thank you for your time. And just a couple things. I'm not against the prohibition of the gaffing. I feel that has nothing but success for us, just by some novice anglers making honest mistakes. I feel like that may or may not lead to the 15% that you showed on the previous slide. But if I had to pick one of the combinations that you guys have proposed, I would probably have to go with C1, if any at all. But I feel that June 1st through September the 30th, if possible. And just a couple other suggestions for y'all to think about. I know y'all are discussing the beginning of the year spawning these fish, and is there something, as far as like a trophy season? I've discussed it with some other fishermen and stuff. So from June 1st, maybe to July 31st, because it's proven, with them's research and such, that the bigger females, carry the eggs, and that's what you're trying to protect. So, maybe from June 1st to July 31st, no fish over 50 inches, and then from August the 1st through September the 30th, you're allowed. And I don't know if you get that data from distributed citations from the state, how many fish would that, give us back if those weren't caught, weren't kept. And the other thing, because the charter for hire vessels have to follow under the recreational fishing regulations, is there a way for the board, to maybe allocate another fish for the charter for hire vessels? Because as well as myself, there's a lot of other captains that depend on this fishery for a living, and I think we make up a small percentage of the catch quota versus the all in all recreational fishermen as a whole. So is there a way to give the charter for hire vessels an extra fish versus your standard recreational fishermen? And I think that's it.
Thank you for your comments, Devin. Okay, I'm going to move down the list. Next on my list, I have Wes Blow. Wes, I'm going to unmute you. All right, Wes, we should be able to hear you now. If we cannot hear you, so if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Is he on computer audio?
Yeah, he's on computer audio. Wes, you're unmuted.
May not have a microphone.
You may not have a microphone on your computer. Okay. We still can't hear you. I will try to help you in the chat, and then we'll try to get you going again. We'll have you call in on the phone instead of through your computer, because it seems like your computer is not connected to the audio. So stand by. At this time, I don't have anyone else on the list wishing to speak. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak? Please use the chat function in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. There's also a raise hand function if you'd prefer to use that.
We don't have any. Oh, John said it.
Okay.
I have a question, if I may. It's Jeff.
Hold on just a moment, Jeff. I think I've got one more.
I think he clicked it.
John Satterley, I see that you have raised your hand. I'm going to unmute you and allow you to speak. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
First, thank you, staff. I know you put a lot of work into this, but I'm kind of echoing the last two gentlemen to comment, and that is, number one, I thought, and was it 2018, that the science had proven that we were more of a, I don't, territorial, maybe the right word, fish on this species, where our numbers here are primarily fish for here. That I know South Carolina did a lot of research that the fish that were there came back to there. It was the same fish over and over. And then for us to allocate Virginia to the numbers that we are, it kind of confuses me that we had science a couple of years ago that kind of led away from that. I know that VMRC does not like to split the recreational and charter industry, but the normal recreational guy is going to go fishing a whole lot more times than maybe those people that can go on a charter boat are going to get to. And that's a big part of my business in the summertime, is running COBIA trips. And if I can have 6 people on the boat that can only keep one fish, it's going to definitely have a negative impact upon all of us that fish that with our boats as charters. And I would like to see, if I had picked one of the things you had on that 8-item list today, that we stayed at the 3 but went to one of the shorter seasons. And which one, you pick the dates, but leave it so that we can at least have people fish. And I forgot my last point, but thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, John. We are attempting to get Mr. Blow connected. I don't see him still connected. So Jeff, why don't we go ahead with your question while I try to still help him out in the chat?
I believe the gentleman that was talking was Mr. Bill Gorman. And I wondered if he, I didn't catch when he thought they spawned. He seemed to be pretty
Sorry,
sure
could
that
you
they
ask
don't
that
spawn.
again?
I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, could you ask that again?
Yeah, Bill, when does Bill Gorman think that they spawn?
So what the science had indicated that they spawn up to 6 months out of the year, every 9 to 14 days. The major issue with the knowing if it's sooner, later, more or not is the number of samples in like the winter months.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Hey guys, I just want to comment on drop the phone real quick first. On the life history of cobia and when they spawn. So according to the stock assessment released by ASMFC, cobia move into nearshore waters when temperatures reach 20 to 25 degrees Celsius or 68 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. And then while they're aggregated inshore, they spawn over a period of 4 to 6 weeks. So spawning is localized with at least 2 genetic distinct spawning aggregations occurring within the Atlantic stock, one in Virginia and the other in South Carolina. And then they're also, they're batch spawners. So females spawn every 4 to 6 days during that spawning season.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna attempt to allow Wes to speak again. You can just hold on for a moment. Wes, I'm unmuting you.
Hello?
Yep, now we can hear you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Sorry for that. Technology challenged. Anyway,
That's okay.
Of the options that y'all have proposed, I would agree with the staff recommendation. Make sure I clearly understand that. That also includes the prohibiting gaffing. Is that correct?
That is the staff recommendation, yes.
Okay, I do think that's very important. Just from what one of the other gentlemen said, that people that really don't know how to gaff a fish, they're killed. This year, I saw dead cobia under 40 inches floating in the bay that were clearly gaffed. So I think that's a very good thing. Because you only have these options here, and it looks like they are just getting to what ASFMC wants. But I want you to think about something else. ASFMC also controls striped bass. Everybody in Virginia knew for years before this last year that there was a serious problem with striped bass. It took them 5 or 6 years to do something about it. So now with cobia, people that have seriously fished for these for a long time know that there's been a problem for the last 4 or 5 years. There's less fish, less big fish being caught. So for Virginia to only do what is minimal to appease ASFMC, I'm very much afraid that we're going to end up in the same situation in 4 or 5 years that we are with striped bass. If we remember, 6 or 8 years ago in January and February, Rudy Inlet was just slam packed with charter boats from all up and down, mostly northern boats coming down. It was an incredible fishery. That is all gone. So if we sit back and don't take enough corrective action to protect this fish, and I sincerely believe that the cobia is the most important fish in the bay to us for economic reasons and others. There's no other fish that we have right now that has as much interest in fishing for than this fish. So I do support the C1. I strongly recommend that FMAC and VMRC think about just doing the minimum that an organization, ASFMC, has, and they clearly failed with their regulation requirements for striped bass. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Wes. I'm going to continue to move through the list. Next on my list, I have Alex. Alex, stand by. I'm going to unmute you.
Absolutely.
All right, Alex, you should be able to speak now.
Thanks, Shannon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Thank you. First, I want to start off by saying thank you to staff. This was a great presentation, very easy to follow. Thank you for all your hard work. There's a lot of options here, and I know that took a lot of time. That being said, I just had a quick question about the analysis. Was it ever, and you may have touched on it before, but did staff ever look into the differences in vessel limits, 2 different vessel limits, one for the private sector versus the for-hire sector?
Yeah, Alex, I'm going to let Summers handle that. We did.
Yeah, so
Okay,
we did look at that. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough MRIP intercepts with just charter information. It decreased the sample size to a very minimum amount, and we would have not been able to use that data. So we kept it together into one recreational sector.
And from a non-data standpoint, this was something that was brought to the commission previously for striped bass, splitting the 2 sectors. And the commission was not in favor of splitting sectors at this time. So it didn't really work from a data standpoint, and it probably will not work from a management standpoint either.
Okay, all right, I understand. That being said, I would go with staff recommendation just because I think the season works. It protects the spawning stock. Each year I see more and more anglers on the water. Knowing that we're protecting the spawning stock is good in my eyes. And September being so variable, it achieves a 42%, and therefore that's what I would approve, or I would go for. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. Okay, stand by for just a moment. I'm going to go through the list and make sure that I've captured anyone who has not yet spoken that would like to speak. So if you have not yet spoken and you would like to speak on the topic, please indicate by doing so either in the chat bar, or you can raise your hand and let me know that you would like to speak. I do have one call-in user who that is not, that is just on the phone. I'm going to unmute that specific person and see if they'd like to talk, just because they can't raise their hand. So if you're just on your phone alone and you're not on the WebEx and you'd like to comment, please indicate, let us know, say something.
No, I'm just listening in.
Okay, we're just checking. Thank you. All right, hold on just a moment. Let me go through the chat. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone in the chat who hasn't yet spoken. I do have that Bill would like to make another comment. Bill, I'm going to unmute you now. You should be able to talk.
I just wanted to note, during the life history section at the CDAR, we discussed the 4 to 6 week period, which was more reflective of what South Carolina had done to determine their peak spawning, which was totally dependent upon 2 years of tournaments. They also did some larvae sampling that was showing eggs through September. But if we only have 4 to 6 weeks of spawning, that means the reproductive nature of Atlantic cobia is 1/4 of what they know the Gulf is. I just wanted to make that comment, and thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I'm going to continue to run down the list. Jonathan French, I had that you would also like to speak again.
Yes, thank you. And again, I appreciate everyone's time and letting us have multiple opportunities to speak. I joined the call late, so I did not realize that the gaffing restriction was on the table. I'm going to speak on behalf of peer anglers. They normally don't have much of a voice in these conversations. While drop netting red drum is certainly very easy to do for peer anglers, for cobia, drop net proposition is incredibly problematic and causes a lot of issues. So what I would ask for a modification if a gaffing restriction is put in place to allow for gaffing for peer fish for both safety and for effectiveness reasons, especially for piers where anglers don't have access to a large drop hoop net. So thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, I'm going to continue down my list. I also see that Wes Blow would like to make another comment. Wes, I'm going to unmute you now.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I just wanted to make a comment about the sector separation, and I personally never want to see that in Virginia. I don't think charter boats should have more advantage, or recreational fishermen, single recreational fishermen on their private vessels should have any advantage. They should always be equal. The debacle of red snapper. That is how that started down in the Gulf 20 years ago, and it's an absolute disaster. Not to mention that now Mid-Atlantic Council is doing that with the blue line tilefish, you know, separating the recreational people what they can catch, which is a horrible way to go. And I do not ever want to see Virginia do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. Next on my list, I see Mike Avery. Mike Avery, you'd like to make another comment? Hold on just a moment.
I guess it's more of a question. When we have the vessel limit of 2 per boat, my question is that 2 what? 2 40 inches to 50 inches? Can one of them be over 50 inches? Is that kind of the staff proposal? And
yeah, so that would remain the same as it is in current regulation. So it's 1 per person, 2 per vessel, whichever is more restrictive. And then the minimum size is 40 inches total length, but you can have one on the vessel that's over 50 inches total length.
okay, that I see that now. So that answers the question. And I do echo the sector separation. I don't see that as an option, so I didn't address it. But I'm a charter captain myself, and I don't think we should have sector separation in Virginia. The angler on the boat is the same. It's the recreational angler, whether he's on a private boat or a charter boat. So I've always felt that the limits should be recreational limits apply to charters and recs both. So I would not be supportive of entertaining a sector separation option. And I'm glad you don't have that. So, but I just wanted to echo that comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, with that, I don't see any other comments. So we're going to put the discussion screen back up. And we'd like to hear from the committee after hearing from the public.
Okay, so the public comment period is closed, but that does not preclude the public from sending in emails, letters. So you still can comment, and Pat would love to hear from you. But now it's back to the committee for discussion and action. And I can't see us, so go. Anyone have anything to say?
And just before we get to that, Dr. Neal, hold on just a moment. That's a good point. You can still submit comment. We do anticipate this going before the commission at the December meeting. If people would like to submit public comment, they can submit it online to us at the fisheries email address, which is
It's fisheries@mrc.virginia.gov.
Right.
We will set up a Survey Monkey.
And we will set up a Survey Monkey with the options discussed this evening that will go out on our Facebook page and on our website, and we'll work with some of the organizations to make sure that that's distributed throughout the recreational community. So with that, sorry, go right ahead, Dr. Neal. I apologize for cutting in.
All right, the issue's back towards the committee. All right, so anyone have discussion or a motion to make?
This is Tom Powers. I do have one discussion that's not something staff has put up yet, but when you look at the regulation, it does not say per day. Oh, wait a minute. 3 vessels, I'm sorry. I take it back. It's a maximum vessel limit, 3 cobia per vessel per day. Sorry. The individual does not say that, though, I think, but that's fine. Never mind.
All right, thank you, Tom. Anyone else?
Yeah, this is Jeff Deem. I think Mike Avery was the one who suggested taking it out to the public through his clubs and so forth to get an input from them. Would there be time for that? Could we meet again in December or November?
Jeff, I think we can get that information to you guys. I don't think it's necessary for us to hold an entire meeting for that. Unfortunately, with this timeline, we need to submit an implementation plan to ASMFC following a meeting next week, but then that will need to go before the commission. So the timeline is a little bit tight there. So if you guys want to see the outcome of that survey, we can make sure that that gets distributed to the FMAC. but we would like to hear maybe some recommended options that you all would like to see in that survey that we can bring back to you in a few weeks once that's distributed.
The other way to look at this is possibly which ones do you want to remove?
Right. Are there options in here that are just an absolute no?
It's a definite no. Take that off and let's work backwards. You know, because we really don't want to put out a survey with eight.
It's a lot of options.
What will happen is we'll get 18%, and we'll get low numbers. So we want to keep it down to 3 to 4 options if we could. So if there are options on the that nobody wants, we'll take those off the table now.
This is Mike Lightfoot. Why don't you take the split seasons off, because that would be very hard for the Marine Police to enforce.
How does the rest of the committee feel about that suggestion?
This is Jeff Thiem. I think the staff recommendation sounds pretty good to me. There's one vote anyway.
Jeff, can we make a motion?
I think so. We've talked to Ken.
Yeah, anyone but me, I guess. Hey, Jeff, you can make a motion now since I'm chairing.
Great. Go ahead. Make your motion, please.
I'd like to make a motion to move forward with staff recommendation. C1, the 2 vessel limit and prohibit gaffing.
Mike Lightfoot seconds that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, here we go with this. Your numbers. I don't know how to get your numbers for you.
Yeah, we can read them off, Ken, if you'd like us to. We can roll call from the top of the screen.
Okay, go ahead and do that, because I think that'll. So when you hear your name, respond, unmute yourself, and respond either I guess aye or nay, so you don't have to call them once.
Yep, that's okay. I can go right ahead and do that. So we'll start off with the top of the screen. I've got Ed Sarfin.
Yes.
Ernie Bowden.
Yes.
Jeff Dean.
Yes.
Michael Lightfoot.
Yes.
Milton Cook.
Yes.
Robert Wigley. Scott McDonald.
Yes.
Tom Powers.
Yes.
And I know I've got John Bello on the phone.
Yes.
And Ken Neal, you can vote as chair. What is your vote?
Usually I abstain on this thing, but I'll go ahead and vote yes, so you have a clean vote.
Okay.
It raises the question, which?
Okay, thank you everyone for your input. We appreciate that.
Okay.
So do we want to go?
One other comment I do think Mike's suggestion of when you do your survey monkey, just get rid of the split seasons would kind of limit your options down to, I think, a manageable number. I think you had a good suggestion there.
Okay, so how does the rest of the committee feel about that? That would get rid of options S3, C3, and C4, and then we would put forward the other 5 options. So that's not a very unmanageable number. Does the rest of the committee agree with that?
Yes, I agree. I think you can probably take out the proposed, the 1 limit, was that option V1? I think you can probably take that out also, because I don't think anybody wants to go to 1 fish. limit it to 4?
I would leave V1 in. I think it's good to have it there. Maybe I think we're going to be looking towards the future, not very far out that might be the case.
Okay.
Team's in favor of taking out the split seasons.
Okay.
All right, I think you have enough input on that one. And so
I think we do.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank everybody. Thank the public who participated in that, and thank everyone for trying to take your turn on these very unusual circumstances we're living under. So that would move on to, I guess we're done with new business or other business. Atlantic Filter and Spot.
That's right.
We were supposed to be talking about the permit program for COBIA yet. You said we're going to put that off till the end of this discussion.
Yep.
We're done with
we
that.
also have one more slide, so let's move on to that next one. So one more thing that we wanted the committee to consider is the fact that, we might potentially gain a few days back from ASMFC. So we'd like to talk to the committee about where they'd prefer to see those few days. So if we get a couple of hundred fish, that's going to be fewer days in the beginning of the season. If you select June, you can have more days at the end of the season if you select September. And we're kind of taking those split seasons off the table. Like we discussed, there would be a lot of limitations with that because it's very hard to add back days into the middle of the season. So we wanted to discuss this with the committee. There could be some minor adjustments to those dates and which way they'd prefer us to go with that.
Anybody on the committee have a preference, beginning of the season, end of the season?
It's something we can also put into the survey as well.
Yeah, and I think you're going to need to get more public comment on that.
Okay.
I think beginning of the season would be better.
Yep. Okay. We'll take that into consideration. We'll also add that as another question in the Survey Monkey, since it's not that long. It's an easy thing for us to get feedback on from the public as well. So, okay, why don't we move into the permit program? So what we wanted to show folks tonight is the recreational COBIA permit program. We've gotten a lot of questions about that in the years. So what you've seen up on your screen is the permit program throughout the years, the number of people who had a permit that did not report, and the number of people who held a permit who did not report, as well as the reporting rate. So this is what we've gotten so far. 2020 is obviously still up in the air. The timeline for that is next Wednesday, the 21st is the last day that you can report up until midnight. So this is kind of our update on where the permit program stands. What we did want to bring to the attention of the committee is the fact that the COBIA permit program has changed a lot through the years. It's still in its infancy. So most times before ASMFC accepts a survey or a program, it needs to be a long-running standard program that has remained the same for many years. So just so everybody understands, this has been a short program who's changed quite frequently. So back in 2016, that was when we first started the program. 2017 and 2018 was when we first added the mandatory reporting requirement. However, there was nothing associated with that reporting requirement that kind of had people report. In 2019, we added language to the regulation stating that if you did not report in that year, you would not receive a permit in the following year. And that's only, and eligibility is only for 1 year. So 2019 and 2020 are probably the two most standardized parts of that program, as the regulation has remained the same for those 2 years. We did see an increase in reporting rates, I think, because of those changes. But reporting rates are still getting higher, but they're not quite there yet. We've been trying to, staff has been making a really big push and a big effort to get out emails, to get out Facebook posts, to get out reminders, to make sure that our permittees are actually reporting. We did want to go, let's go to the next slide. Yep. So there are some reporting errors that we want to bring to the attention of the committee. With a permit program where where recreational anglers need to report themselves, there are going to be some errors. So some of the errors that we've seen so far are double counting permittees on the same vessel. We have people who aren't actually inputting what they caught when they go into the Saltwater Journal and report online. They're just putting that information into the comment section, so that's not getting to us. Folks are reporting only one trip to satisfy the reporting requirement. They go out once and then they report once and then they don't report again when they go out for the rest of the season. We have people that report no activity immediately in the season and then end up reporting trips throughout the rest of the season. So it's questionable as to whether or not they're actually reporting all of their trips throughout the rest of the season. And we also have people who get the permit and then immediately send us an email or a, send in a form saying they're not going to fish, no activity before the season even starts. So what I do want to do is temper expectations with this permit program. MRIP, I know, has a lot of flaws. I think we've discussed them at length, but the problem is, as of right now, ASMFC does not take angler survey programs as recreational harvest reporting. Now that could change. We are going to talk to them about evaluating our program, but these are some of the common reporting problems that we're seeing, and that's why it's not statistically significant in their eyes right now. So we do want to tell the committee we're going to work with ASMFC to see what can be done with that program and evaluate it. But we need to temper expectations here. There's a reason why MRIP is used across the coasts. So that's our update. We're happy to take any questions on that.
This is Mike Lightfoot. What was the difference in total number of fish for last year on the reporting versus MRIP?
We don't have that data available.
So do you want to read it?
We got what was caught total. Well, what was caught total from our data was 31,134. MRIP, what was harvested, is 54,770.
Did you hear it? Can you hear him?
But we only kept in our data set we only kept 7,600 fish last year.
So just to kind of piggyback on top of that too, so we did do a statistical test between MRIP data and our reporting data, and they do not come from the same population. So just to sort of piggyback on that, they are not statistically the same.
It's way too short of a data set to do much with. I mean, it's, when Shanna says long time period, usually it's a minimum of 10 years.
Right.
I mean, NEMAP, you're all familiar with NEMAP, and everyone was touting how wonderful NEMAP was, and it is a great survey, but they've turned it down multiple times to use in stock assessments because it was, they didn't have 10 years of data yet. So, and we've had multiple changes, so, that's the problem. I mean, it's too short-lived at this point. I mean, and all these other problems we've had, and I will tell you, the staff have worked harder on this than anything else. With the people not reporting and getting the calls. Right now, we still have 2,259 people who have not reported. And we're going to hope, next year, I might just say, we're not going to entertain phone calls from people because it was insane how much the staff had to deal with this year. With us saying saying we're gonna adhere to this, you know, if you're out of compliance, you're not getting one. So. But, you know, those 2,600 people who didn't get this year, they will be eligible next year. So the number of fees could potentially go up that much.
Pat, Mike Lightfoot again. Would you ever entertain charging the public, say $100 for a permit and giving them a number of tags, and that would cover your staff costs?
I mean, that goes back to that tag. Yes, we'd have to get that approved, though. I mean, you know, that's a de facto license fee, and we'd have to get that approved through the. We'd have to get that approved.
Is that like a state government approve?
I believe we may have to go through legislation to get that done.
Forget that. Thank you.
It depends how it's worded and what it's defined as.
This is Tom Powers. My problem is that I can accept that it's going to take a while to get there, but we need to have some assurances from somewhere that this program is going to bear fruit and that it can be used for management, because this is a so infrequently intercepted fish from MRIP standpoint, and their effort is so overstated that if we don't have something that we can go back and say, no, you're wrong, then if we can't use it and there's not a path forward where you can say, in so many years, if we do this, we'll be using it, then we shouldn't be doing the program.
Hi, Tom. Yeah, that is why we want to work with ASMFC to do an evaluation of this program. Thus far, in speaking with them, these angler survey programs, the only data that they accept use of is discard data, discard length specifically. So I completely...
This is not an angler survey. This is a permit to harvest. I would never call it an angler survey to anybody. I would always call it a permit to harvest, because that's what it is. If I don't have this permit in my pocket, I cannot harvest a cobia. Even if I accidentally catch one, which is the only way I'll catch one, I can't keep it if I don't have a permit. So this is a permit to harvest, not a survey.
Okay,
and
we don't, that's fine. The nomenclature doesn't necessarily matter in ASMFC's eyes, because that's how they view this permit. They view it the same as angler survey programs throughout the states. So I completely agree with you that we need to speak with ASMFC about evaluating this program to understand whether or not it's going to bear fruit.
Right, because if it's not going to bear fruit, then we should not put the burden on the anglers to do it.
And Tom, I mean, I'm not going to argue that, but any new survey, you don't know with any new survey whether or not it's going to bear fruit. The only thing we can, hope is that, do they think it has promise? At this point, they're not going to be able to tell us with, I'd say, 2 years of data.
No, but they should be able to give you a metric. And the metric should be, after you get done taking or not allowing permits the next year, and people actually get the word that and understanding that you're not going to allow permits, and so they'll do their reporting like they're supposed to. Then you'll have it to where you have 4,000 permits and only 300 or 500 who didn't report. That's a very reasonable statistic. And then they can say, when you get to that point, we'll believe your data. But and we'll start using it. But and again, it's not a survey. This is a permit program. If they're not going to use it and they're not going to give us a defined path forward for where it can be used, then we're wasting your staff's time running the program, and angler frustrations who loses their permit because they didn't report right, and just the burden on people to have to get the permit.
Yep.
So I would respectfully request that sometime next spring, maybe June time, you come back with a report on how we're going to move this forward, or we start considering canceling the program.
I will note, the anglers and the FMAC were the ones who asked us to do this. This was not a commission forwarded program. This was from the anglers and from FMAC.
That's right. And we asked for it so that we had data we can use to point out errors in MRIP and manage this fishery properly. And now you're saying, oh, that's not going to happen in your lifetime. Well, hopefully it'll happen in my lifetime if it's 10 years, but it's not going to happen for 10 years. I mean, that's
how surveys work.
It's not a survey, it's a permit.
You have to have years of information before you can do something with a lot of these things. And that's one of the things the ASMSC looks at. You can't go out and do a project for 1 year and expect them to accept that data immediately.
No, you can't. But then you can. But what you can do is you can present the data every year of, no, last year MRIP said we had 30,000, 10,000 fish harvested, and we believe based on this data, which is a permit program, that it was 8,000 fish. Or it could be the other way, that MRIP says we have 10, and the data shows, our data shows it's 12. Well, then we're screwing up, and we should be harvesting less. But you got to present the data.
Okay.
Yep. Does anyone else on the committee have any comments on the permit program before we move on?
Right. I do see one person in the public that wants to comment on the permit issue, and I do have one comment in that they do accept our winter sea bass data, but that's a smaller fishery where they don't have other data, and it's amazing the effort VMRC puts in collecting that data, but it can be done. All right. So do you want to accept the public comment on this permit issue? I think Jonathan French says he's got something he wants to say.
It's a good example, Ken. I mean, it's a short-lived 1 month. There's a fair amount of effort that goes into it. We check it out. Those folks have to call in every single day they go out, and that's what's required.
Yep.
They have to call into our operations daily, and then we get the information, and we can go meet them at the dock. We could not do that with COBIA.
Nope.
But it is an example of one that can work.
Okay. So if the committee doesn't have any more comments, we do have one member of the public that would like to comment. Jonathan French, I'm going to unmute you. You should be able to speak now.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to echo the comment from the member on FMAC. I believe that was Ernest, but I apologize if I didn't catch your name. Again, for this permit program, I know that there are some questions coming from Atlantic states about the statistical variation with the program. However, the volume of reports collected so far is significantly higher than the number of MRIP intercepts. And I wish that point was hammered more during the Atlantic states meetings. And I appreciate both staff and the folks who are proxies who are there making our case, because there's definitely not as open and transparent opportunity to speak as there is here. I was one of the folks who strongly encouraged the reporting program. I continue to encourage it. There is frustration out amongst anglers, particularly folks who don't instinctively know how to navigate the VMRC site, and have just issues where they're confusion. If there are 3 folks who go out cobia fishing, 2 of whom don't have a boat, 1 person wants to be able to go again. So they say, I'll report this time. And then the owner of the boat decides, you know what, wasn't a great day. I'm going to spend the rest of the year trout fishing. Next spring comes around. And even though the trip was reported, the owner of the boat or the other angler on the boat isn't able to get a permit if they decided to go the next year. I have had personal encounters with that. I find the system to be easy, and I like it, and I greatly appreciate the time staff took to explain it, but that doesn't mean everybody's picking up on it so quickly. So again, if there's an opportunity perhaps to get some feedback from some of the folks whose permits were rejected this past year, what kind of FAQs and what kind of e-push would be helpful to ensure that it doesn't happen again. I think that would be a welcome addition to the program. I greatly appreciate staff's effort. I do want to speak about the legislative intent behind Atlantic States, behind the South Atlantic Marine Fisheries Council. They're tasked legislatively with using, the best information available. And I'm sorry, but it's pretty apparent that MRIP is not the best information. And the member of the FMAC was correct. This was created to present an alternative data source and consider it. And, even though they have said they've rejected it, there hasn't been a real detailed feedback loop as to the specifics that's available transparently and publicly for why this information has not been made available. I strongly encourage to consider or to continue to maintain the permit program, continue to push information out to the public. I will do the same to the best of my ability, and especially spreading that information around the northern neck in that area where there doesn't seem to be as much knowledge about the nuance of the program. I think that would be helpful. And again, continue to fight the good fight with Atlantic States. I think the members of the FMAC understand that there are elements of the Atlantic States who just generally are going to be resistant to any data set that's going to call for restrictions to be less restrictive. And that's been my observation attending the meetings there in Arlington, on top of the fact that they don't seem to have a great deal of interest in allowing members of the general public to speak, and the public comments that are submitted, instead of those comments being submitted as written on the record, summaries are written of the comments, and they very rarely reflect the tenor of a lot of the drafts that I've seen that were sent. So, again, be diligent. Again, thank you to the folks for the FMAC for the time, and please continue to keep the permit program in place until we can win that battle.
Thank you, Jonathan. I have another member of the public who would like to speak on this. Wes Blow, you are unmuted.
Yeah, just a short comment. I think that if the permit and the reporting was accurate, it would be just incredible to help fisheries management. But the truth of it is that it's not. People don't report everything. You posted all these problems with the reporting errors, and it's probably far beyond that. But in the people that I hear talk about reporting, they just don't report accurately. So to think that we're building good information, unfortunately, it's just not the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. Okay, I don't have any other public comments, and I would like to move on. It is 7 o'clock. We have two other quick things to get to on the agenda. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Dr. Neal, actually. Sorry, apologies. I keep on kind of steering the boat.
Well, actually, all I would say is let's thank you, everyone, for this COBIA discussion. To keep getting your opinions in, because we need them at the commission. But now we'll move on to Croker and Spot. More of good news.
Great.
Okay. Okay, so back to me. So just as a reminder, we did present this to you last year, but Croker and Spot use the traffic light approach. Data poor fisheries can use TLAs in place of stock assessments. And for these two species, there was a lot of uncertainty of discards in the North Carolina shrimp trawl fisheries. So the stock assessment did not pass peer review. The TLAs assign a color, so red, yellow, or green, to categorize the condition of the fish population, which is the abundance metric, or the fishery itself, which is the harvest metric. If there is increased red on a TLA, that means that data are declining from a long-term mean based on a reference period, and both the abundance metric and the harvest metric must trigger to solicit a management response. The harvest metric is the coast-wide harvest based on the commercial and recreational landings, and then the abundance metric is based on fishery independent surveys such as CMAP, CHESMAP, and then each trigger level has associated management measures that the state must implement. Okay, so due to COVID-19, VIMS and CHESMAP actually have no index variables for 2019 in the Mid-Atlantic. We did discuss this on a TC call. We discussed the probability of using NEMAP, but ultimately decided against it because of the fact that both of these species would actually trip at 30% regardless of that 2019 data point. So this is for Atlantic croaker. This is the harvest composite. So this is the fishery dependent data. As you can see, for the Mid-Atlantic, it's going to trip at 30%. And then for the South Atlantic, it's going to trip also at 30%. For the croaker abundance composite, which is the fishery independent data, as you can see, the Mid-Atlantic data does not have a 2019 data point, but it's going to trip at 30% even without that data point. And then the South Atlantic actually does not trip, but because the Mid-Atlantic does, it supersedes that, so this is still tripping. And then for spot, the harvest composite, it does still trip at 30% because it's 4 out of the 5 most recent years. And then in the South Atlantic, it trips at 30% again, 4 of the 5 most recent years. And then the abundance composite, the fishery independent data, trips at 30% in the Mid-Atlantic, even without that 2019 data. And then again, in the South Atlantic, it does not trip, but it's superseded by the Mid-Atlantic. So overall, both species, like I said, tripped at 30%. So this means 2 things, recreational and commercial management measures. So the recreational management measures are set in stone, so croaker and spot would both get a 50 fish bag limit. Commercially is a little bit of a different story. The croaker reduction, or the both species would have to achieve a 1% reduction to the average landings from the previous 10 years. But we're not sure what those measures would look like because we haven't confirmed what works best for our anglers. We plan to talk to FMAC and the spot croaker work group in early spring of 2021. And our recommendation to ASMC, the board, is for a spring 2021 implementation of these management measures. And during the TC call, this was echoed by other states such as New Jersey, South Carolina, to give time for public input into that regulatory process. I can take any questions about croaker and spot.
This is Tom Powers. I do have a question.
Yeah.
So when I looked at the data at the advisory panel meeting, we looked at this and talked about it. A 1% reduction in the commercial fishery in Virginia for spot and croaker compared to recent years means a 50% increase or some number like that, or a 30% increase. Why? Because their catch has been going down, and because you're taking it over 10 years, you've got productive years going back that are not like it is now. So what are you going to actually take a reduction in the commercial fishery somehow? Or are you going to follow the rule that says 10 years and we'll just drive these species into the ground like we did gray trout?
Tom, one of the things that we considered in the work group, we've only had one meeting with the work group, and we apologize about that, but we got really hot and heavy with striped bass and menhaden at the end of last year, and then we had COVID this year, was that whatever one of our thoughts was, even though it says only 1%, but what we were considering, and that work group was looking, exploring as well, is if it looks like the 50 fish or whatever we decide on is a 5% cut in the in the recreational harvest, we would expect our commercial sector in our state to take the same. So those are,
Did you hear him?
Yeah, I heard him, but I even wonder if 50 fish limit's going to be any recreational cut for that matter, because you're talking about a species that's depressed now, and you know if you haven't been catching, there's not many people catching 50 fish in the last 3 or 4 years. Setting it to 50 isn't going to make any change. It's only going to make a change if they come back.
that's the maximum krill limit that we'd be allowed under this plan. We could be more conservative than that.
Yeah.
And we're talking internally about what that number should be. And, you know, I've had some conversations with you, people have said everything from 10 to 50. 50 is not enough, but in general, 50 was a number that ASMSD threw out, but, we've talked internally about other numbers lower than that.
Yeah, the big bugaboo with spot is going to be charter captains that want to use them for bait, and they want to be able to keep hundreds of them.
Well, there's an allowance for that.
Yeah, it's not 100, but there is
Is it the right thing to do is the question.
Well, like Pat was saying, this is the lowest that we can go, so we can always go more restrictive, and we plan on discussing that with the work group and FMAC in early spring. So we can definitely discuss it at that point.
I mean, at the meeting next week, they will decide, okay, we've triggered this, we need to do something. When should be the implementation date? And we're all for. I mean, it can't be January 1. It just states can't get it done in time. So as Summer said, it's probably going to be in the spring. It could be as late as July 1. I mean, that's up to the board to decide when the states have to have a plan on how they're going to implement this and what they're going to implement.
This is Mike Lightfoot. I have a question.
Yes.
So the question topic is minimum size limit for spot and croaker on the commercial side. Now, certainly there's a lot of watermen that in the lower bay that gill net for spot, and they are able to selectively pick their size of the spot with the gill net mesh size. But there is a large fishery that is the Holstein fishery that catches spot and croaker that are really, really undersized. And do we have the rep from Amory on the FMAC today?
No, he's not here today.
Okay. He has told us at FMAC, and he's told me that numerous times watermen bring him 10,000 of spot and croaker that are so small that he can't market them, and he has to turn them away, and they end up selling those small, undersized fish to a dog food processor in the Norfolk or Hampton Roads area, or they get sent down to Wanchese and ground up as chum. There's also a guy in Reedville that sells spot as crab bait. It's 50-pound boxes. They're $5 a box instead of the 15 that we pay for Menhaden for crab bait. And I've seen these and I bought these, and these are croakers that are about 3 and 4. These are spot that are 3 and 4 inches long. So, I mean, it just seems that there should be a minimum size for spot and croaker on the commercial side.
Yeah. We've talked about this. Very few of the states have a size limit. Most are opposed to it for a lot of reasons because people use it. They use it recreationally for bait. There are other ways to get at that. Restricting the mesh size maybe for the Holsteins, have them have larger mesh sizes and stuff like that. But we're aware of that there's a lot of small fish being caught in the Holsteins.
A lot could be in the millions of pounds.
Yes, it could be.
And we plan on discussing that at the work group and with FMAC. So
yeah, I just think that it's wrong, and it makes me sick seeing these spot in a $5 50-pound box used for crab bait. And that's it. Thank you.
Can you please sign up for the work group when it comes up?
You mean Lightfoot?
We already have, we have a work group, I think it's 6 people. I mean, we had, the meeting we had was very productive. We had it right before an FMAC meeting. I think there's 6 or 8 people on it already.
And we are aware of that. We're aware of the problem of those small fish, and that is something we know, Mike, that needs to be addressed. So we are working on that.
Okay, there's a very interesting VIM study. If you just Google VIM study on spot and croaker, you'll see a study that VIMS did for haul seiners on trying to come up with ways to reduce these small fish from being caught with the haul seiners. And the bottom line, it's a very interesting story on what they did, but it was their efforts were unsuccessful.
I don't think you can group all haul seines. I've got a couple in Virginia Beach that don't really catch small fish. This time of the year in the fall when we catch them, they're actually decent sized fish. Same thing with pound netters on the Eastern Shore. You know, you do have watermen who, if they get a group of fish like that are too small, they do turn them loose. But I know that is the bait problem is a problem, and I am concerned. You know, we're talking about the bait being a problem in the commercial fishery, those little fish. The recreational industry uses the same fish for bait also. That's what the charter boat captains are using. So if you multiply the charter boat captains by the bait that they're using, isn't it the exact same thing? They're using the 3-4 inch spot and croaker. So I think that, you know, we're saying a size limit on commercial. We do got to pay attention to recreational because they're using them also, which I don't think is right. So, but anyhow, we'll address all that in the work group and the next meeting. So anyhow, that's my comment.
Thanks, Scott. Anything else?
Okay.
Moving along.
All right, next we'd like to give the committee an update on speckled trout. Again, this is just a quick update, so kind of the point of this is to let FMAC know what meetings they should look forward to in the future where we can debate all of these issues and talk through these topics more thoroughly. Next slide. So to just give people a little bit of background on speckled trout are another species that are managed by the ASMFC. And back in 2011, the South Atlantic Board approved the Omnibus Amendment for spotted sea trout, aka speckled trout, and Spanish mackerel. An Omnibus Amendment just means these species are kind of grouped together, so it's just an amendment that has all 3 of these species. Back in 1995, the VMRC established a self-imposed commercial quota for speckled trout, and that was approximately 51,000 pounds. And this comes from the average landings from 1993 and 1994, plus an additional 25% on top of that. And the reasoning that the Commission and the FMAC established this was that they wanted to proactively establish a response to recreational fishery restrictions that were being put in place at that time. So that quota has stayed steady from that 1995 implementation date. Next slide, please. So we've seen a few issues with the commercial speckled trout fishery and that quota overage. Back in 2012, we had a large quota overage. So in 2014, to address that, the Commission established a weekly mandatory buyer reporting, and that runs from August 1st through November 30th. And also at that time, they established a commercial management trigger. So the commercial management trigger is that when our commercial quota is predicted to reach 80%, we move that fishery into a bycatch fishery with a 100-pound daily landing limit. In order for that to be considered bycatch, that means you need to have at least 100 pounds of some other species on board as well. So back in 2019, so just last year, during the week of October 9th, we saw harvest happening very quickly. these mandatory weekly buyer phone calls were not sufficient in notifying staff of the accurate harvest in a timely manner. And so that bycatch provision was surpassed, and we actually had to close the fishery on October 16th in response. So we didn't even hit the 80% bycatch fishery. So in order to address this issue, staff recommended a daily buyer harvest reporting to the commission. Next slide, please. So on your screen, you can see that at the July commission meeting, the commissioners approved changes to VAC 2080 so that buyers now report their speckled trout purchases daily. And this happens at the beginning and the end of the season. So to kind of orient everyone, speckled trout has a little bit different of a fishing season. It starts September 1st, and then it rolls through August 31st of the following calendar year. So the commission put this in place, kind of mirroring what was already in regulation, but upping that to a daily limit so that we can react a little bit faster when we get these phone calls rolling in to monitor the quota. Next slide, please. So what we've, no, that's okay. So what you've got on your screen is our commercial landing history. And what we kind of wanted to bring to the committee is the fact that we know that this reporting measure is sort of a Band-Aid for a larger need to evaluate the fishery. So if you look at the graph on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the landing history in recent years. And you can see variable landings that sort of surround that dotted line, and that dotted line represents the quota that VMRC imposed back in 1995 and has remained steady since then. That overage in 2012, that big overage in 2012 that you can see is that impetus for starting the bycatch trigger and those reporting changes that I ran you through in 2014. If you look at the chart on the right-hand side of the screen, you can kind of see the history of when we used the bycatch trigger. So once that was implemented, we used the bycatch trigger again in 2017, while landings in 2019, as I mentioned before, kind of occurred too quickly to impose that trigger, so our quota was met and exceeded. This year, the quota is obviously not finalized, but we did hit our 80% a few weeks ago, and we implemented the bycatch trigger on October 3rd, and we closed the commercial fishery actually yesterday, since we've projected that we've met the quota at 100% this year. So with all of these changes in the commercial fishery since the 1995 quota implementation, we think that it's time for all of us to kind of take a closer look at this fishery and evaluate our management measures and kind of bring them up to date with more recent times. So the first thing that we're doing is we have our staff monitoring the progress of the North Carolina stock assessment, which will have an associated status determination. For those of you not familiar, North Carolina and Virginia are actually considered one stock. So we hope that the science coming out of this stock assessment can help us to better inform what we need to do with this fishery in the future. So what we'd like to bring forward to the FMAC is kind of discussing these long-term fishery issues this coming spring in 2021 with an FMAC workshop. It'll probably take a couple of follow-up meetings since we'll really need to kind of dig in and talk through this and discuss the need for potential regulation changes prior to that 2021 fishing season. As a reminder, that would start September 1st in 2021. So some of the things that, you know, this is not a fully inclusive list. I've kind of listed out a few of the things that we'll bring forward to the FMAC. Obviously, the FMAC we're going to have a completely open conversation with FMAC about other topics, things that we can do to change the fishery. But a few of the things that we're thinking about internally is obviously evaluating the quota based on the status of the stock coming from that North Carolina stock assessment. We also might want to explore the value of gear-based quotas. That's how we have menhaden set up right now, and we also recognize that certain gear types are catching a lot more speckled trout than other gear types, so there might be something there that we might want to explore with the FMAC. We also want to evaluate the bycatch trigger and its associated limit and kind of explore whether or not it's possible to have bycatch after a closure. So is the bycatch trigger that we have in place working? Is the associated limit in place working? So those are the types of things that we'll bring forward as well. Obviously, we've kind of got a weird fishing season for speckled trout. So another thing that FMAC will be able to discuss is the season. Does the season still work? Does it still make sense? And just running through, again, brainstorming any other potential solutions that you guys have. And overall, our goal is to really evaluate how to utilize this resource practically. It's obviously changed throughout the years. We haven't really looked at it since we've put the quota in place. So we'd like to work together with all members of the fishery, all different sectors, to make sure that what we're doing makes sense for speckled trout and for our anglers. So with that, I'll take any questions, but I would like to remind everybody that, again, this is kind of an update of things that we're going to discuss in the future, so we don't need to really work through brainstorming other solutions or anything like that until this spring.
Scott here.
This is Tom. Go ahead, Scott.
Will there be a separate work group, or will we do it through FMAC? Is my first question. Second question is there any way possible to get an emergency regulation in place now for a small bycatch? I threw 3 trout in the trash can today. They're a bycatch to the spot boats, and it's sad. We're not stopping the boats from catching them. They're catching them. They're fishing for spot, and to throw them in the trash can is sad. So whether it's a 25-pound bycatch, just something that we don't have to throw these fish away. And, we had discussed doing this last year, and obviously with COVID and everything else, we didn't get around to it. But I think it's important to look at because we're just throwing these fish in the trash. So
yeah. So to answer your first question, Scott, I think that's kind of up to FMAC. If FMAC feels that they would like to bring in experts from the fishery as well as populate a work group with some FMAC members, we're more than willing to do that. Okay. To answer your second question, I think the issue being is that there's a lot of problems that we see with this fishery. And what we did this year was really kind of slapping a Band-Aid on something that needs a tourniquet. So I think as you'll remember, this has been it's a pretty controversial fishery. Back in 1995, Absolutely. A lot of people turned out for this. And right. So I think the hesitation is to put even a small bycatch on right now, without spending a lot of time shopping that out to the public is not going to look great in the spring when we really sit down and evaluate that. So we're, another issue that we're trying to kind of, think about is obviously, folks are calling in. People have been good about doing their daily buyer reporting, but we also recognize that there's probably some reports out there that aren't rolling in just yet. So the likelihood that we've gone over the quota is there. So I think our recommendation would be to hold off until we can evaluate this more thoroughly in the spring, but we definitely hear you, and it is top of our list to work on.
I understand we've probably gone over a little bit. Hopefully we didn't exceed it this year. We stayed on top of things. And if it's a shared quota with North Carolina, North Carolina catches 200,000 to 300,000 pounds a year. So even if we were able to get small bycatch and we added another 10,000 pounds or throughout the court, I mean, I don't think it would be that much. If we had just a small bycatch for the rest of the year, I don't think we'd add that much on top of whatever we've gone over, and we wouldn't just waste the fish. So, but anyhow, I appreciate where you're coming from. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Scott.
This is Tom Powers. I would like for when you start looking at this in the future to pay attention to the fact that the recreational fishery has taken at least 2, maybe 3 substantial reductions in bag limits and such since 1995. And when you start saying, well, what I'm hearing is figure out ways to open up the commercial fishery or increase the quota, the recreational fishery is sacrificing so that they can maintain a quality fishery, which does not necessarily mean as many fish as you can catch, but a quality fishery. The second thing is that there are gear types that have had the rules changed. And for example, Hall seines up until around 2005 or something, or 3, the laws were that one end and only one end of a Hall seine could remain fixed until the net was closed. And people have been setting these out. David Moss came in a couple years ago and pointed this out, and nothing was done about it, that there are Hall seiners now that are taking their nets out in the fall and they're catching these speckled trout by setting them up as as a fish trap, effectively, where the fish come up and swim into a pocket in the net, and then they'll come in once a day and close the net up and harvest the fish, and then they'll take it back out and stake the far end of the net out, so it's just effectively a trap. We should be looking at how that gear is used, because I believe that that's the gear type that's doing this derby fishing type harvest.
Hey, Tom, thank you for your comments. Yeah, I mean, I think that's why we want to bring this to the FMAC and not make any changes to the fishery until we hear from both sectors. So I appreciate your comments on that.
Hey, anyone else?
May I speak?
Yes, Ernie, we can hear you now.
I think when we look into this, I was on FMAC when this was passed back in '95. You know, the water temperatures have changed quite a bit in the last 25 years. The stock probably has really increased. I saw more speckled trout this year than I've ever seen. Of course, you know, just like Scott said, he threw 3 away. I can promise you the fishermen threw a lot more than that away. I'm not seeing them now. I was seeing them prior to September. You know, we needed a small bycatch. The 51,000 pound may have been appropriate at the time, and it may be appropriate now, but we don't know that. And as Tom Powers said earlier, they had taken 2 reductions, but what we need to look at is overall landings. What does landings look like now in the recreational and the commercial sector compared to 1995? Just because you've had substantial reductions in creel limits doesn't mean you've had a substantial reduction in the number of fish being harvested, because you could have potentially way more people, or people going more days than they were before because the fish are available. So I think, you know, when we do this discussion in March or whenever, all that information needs to be put forth, not just the fact that we've had a 51,000 pound quota for 25 years, and it was just, you know, it was not a science-based quota whatsoever. There was no science involved in it at all. It was just an assumption that we were going to give an increase of 25% if the stock increased. But in all fairness, we don't even know how accurate mandatory reporting was then. That was brand new. At that time, it had just started. So we really don't even know if the numbers we were basing it on were actually fact. So I think we need to take all that into consideration when we do have our discussion going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Ernie. We appreciate that historical context, most definitely.
Okay, thank you. Staff have anything else for us tonight?
We do not. That is the completion of what we've got on the agenda.
Okay, thank you for a job well done. Does anyone have any questions of staff before we go home for tonight?
Mike Lightfoot has one quick one.
That's what we like, quick.
I would like at a future FMAC meeting that we discuss a regulation that hadn't been enforced for some time, but started to get enforced a little bit last fall, relating to striped bass gill net mesh sizes, restrictions up in the James River, York, Mattaponi, Pamunkey, and Rappahannock rivers that in the early spring, and I know that Pat knows exactly what this is, and so does Jeff. It's written into Virginia code, but it really, really impacts the waterman gill netting rockfish, the smaller rockfish. And I'd like that discussed as soon as we can.
Yeah, Mike, it's that 2-week window where there's a problem there, and we're looking into that. Mike, you said it's in code or is it in regulation?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is in code.
All right, let me look at that then, because, all right, that's good to know.
Excuse me. That'll make sure I got the right Virginia legislature code.
That's what when we talk about code, that's what we're talking about. Okay, we'll take a look at that.
Yeah, that,
I didn't,
yeah, and I think the intent of that is to protect American shad. But it's awful restrictive because a lot of those shad aren't even in the rivers yet. But future FMAC meeting, please.
yeah, we've got that on, Adam and I have talked about that at length.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Mike. Anyone else with something really quick before we go home? Obviously, I want to go home.
I'd like to thank staff for all their hard work. We appreciate everything you guys have done through this, with the whole COVID thing and being restricted, but thank you guys for everything you do. That's my only comment.
All right, and that's a good comment. On that, we will adjourn. I'm not taking a motion. I'm just saying we adjourned. All right, I will see all of you whenever we can see each other. I'll see staff online at our next commission meeting. I thank everybody. Good night.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks for chairing, Ken.
Thanks, Ken. We appreciate you chairing.